it's been 124 days now, 1,460 left for President Mahama. We ask, what comes next after the 120-day social contract? In fact, how does President Mahama consolidate and sustain the gains the government touts it has gained to have made, as well as satisfying the aspirations of the Ghanaian people? We're talking about the fight against corruption, the assets declaration coupled with a code of conduct for political appointees, the fight against galamsey, the 24-hour economy, and more, including unemployment as well. We'll be discussing these issues and more with our guests. Joining us, we have Shamima Muslim. She's a deputy spokesperson for government, presidential spokesperson. And then we have John Osai-Kwapong, Dr. John Osai-Kwapong. He's a CDD fellow. Both of them join Sweetie Abochi and yours truly. Good morning.
Good morning. Apparently, I haven't been by since. Is that the case?
Since you went somewhere.
But I've been on the platform multiple times.
Oh, we've seen you on the platform.
With us.
We've just not seen you here.
Here.
And I will say Emre Dani.
Emre Dani, Davy.
Emre Dani.
Oh, Davy. Same. Why?
Doc, last time I saw you at a certain party, and today we're here continuing.
Yes, I was.
With it. Anyway.
Well, so let's get the conversation started. Like Ben said, 124 days into the return as President of the Republic, John Dramani Mahama clearly has reached a key milestone. Yeah. We just finished assessing his 120-day social contract. But let's revisit that briefly. And I want to take your assessment, Dr. John Osai-Kwapong, of the 120 days, and then we can segue into the conversation proper. How would you assess the 120 days of, well, should I say 24 days now as we're speaking, of President John Dramani Mahama in office?
Thank you very much. For me, I've been saying that as I observe the second presidency of John Mahama, I believe he's trying to make sure that it looks distinct from the first presidency. And partly, I believe that is also driven by some of the challenges and some of the lessons learned from the first presidency. So on matters of governance, you can tell that he's trying to set a different tone, give different signals on how he plans to deal with some of our governance challenges. So I would highlight, for example, the Constitution Review Commission. There's been a lot of conversations over the years about some of the issues, challenges with constitutional architecture. And so the move to do something about it, I think, is something in the right direction. I know we'll get into the code of conduct, yes, but that's also another important issue for me as another tool in the basket that can be used to address issues of integrity, corruption, appropriate behavior of public officers in office.
Right.
On the economy, which was central to the NDC's campaign in 2024, I mean, I know that with the budget, the targets that have been set, the indications that have been given in areas that the government wants to prioritize are in the right direction. What I'm still waiting for, and I know the president gave an update on where they are with the 24-hour economy, but that remains for me a critical piece of the president's economic agenda, given how central it was to their 2024 campaign.
Hopefully, Shamima is here and will provide some insight because we want to interrogate the roadmap. I mean, after 120 days, what's next, Shamima? But I want to give you the chance to reflect on a trending topic, Sammy Gyamfi, and that video we saw with Agrada. What did you make of it? I know that he's apologized, but people are still calling for his head.
Right.
What do you make of it?
Well, thank you very much. And I'm sure that because I may not get the opportunity to do it again, let me just, first of all, express our deep gratitude to the people of Ghana for their cooperation, collaboration, and participating in the public discourse. We are very excited at the new chapter that we have all ushered in, new chapter of real democracy where the public discourse is encouraged and citizens are encouraged to truly participate in these vital conversations that, elicit sometimes great solutions. And so we are very happy that many Ghanaians, including the opposition New Patriotic Party, has taken the invitation of His Excellency to feel free to express themselves through whatever legal vehicle is available to them, and that includes protestations.
Yeah.
And so we have seen them already, conduct 2 protestations to test, the commitment of His Excellency to this new era of freedoms on the side of citizens. And so we are happy about also the feedback we have received after His Excellency presented to the people of Ghana, in whom sovereignty really, resides, his social contract. He was not obliged to. It was a commitment he made upon himself to serve him well in terms of the urgency he himself was bringing to the new, to the task of the presidency. And also to prove to the people of Ghana that when we came to them and we called on them to vote for experience over experiment, this is really what we meant. We meant that there's going to be a new era informed largely by lessons learned from the previous experience, and that deep knowledge about how the system works and where the leakages were and what the right sets of approaches should be is what informed even our manifesto, which was really resetting Ghana for jobs, accountability, and prosperity. So if you look at the 120-day promises, it focuses on our key priority areas that we believed if we were quickly able to put the strong and the right foundations in, the reset agenda will well be on course. And I'm really happy at the feedback from all well-meaning and fair-minded Ghanaians that indeed we have shown some real progress, and really what we are expecting from now on is a further consolidation of the gains. And
in fact, that's the purpose of this conversation.
Yes.
So that, you speak for the government as well, so you can also give us some insight. But
Definitely.
we need to get the conversation going.
Yes.
I was asking about your reflections
and it's
on,
part of the Sammy Gyamfi matter.
Yes.
It's part of, I think that for everybody, self-awareness is very important. And I think one of the values of great leadership is self-awareness. Self-awareness to be able to look back at an action of yours, whether it's a private action that has become a public matter, in the case of this Sammy Gyamfi issue, to be able to have the presence of mind to recognize where the indiscretion might have occurred, and to, without any prompting, come out to acknowledge, the mistake that may have been made, the optics of a private moment now played out, in the public for everyone to see and have opinions about reasonably. What we would want to say is that as a government, the Chief of Staff has since invited Sammy Gyamfi to come and speak to this matter. And so the Chief of Staff
when
and the
exactly
Office of the Presidency. Pardon?
When exactly is Sammy showing up?
Oh, I'm sure today. It's an urgent matter. So
I'm just asking because you walk the corridors of power, so you would know when.
This happened over the weekend, as you know. So the invitation has gone to Sammy to show up. And because of the respect he has to the office, I'm sure that he will be showing up today. But also to add to the fact that it comes at the back of the launch of a new code of conduct. And
Yes.
If you look at the code of conduct, there are a number of sanctions for whatever identified acts of indiscretion or wrongdoing. It ranges from an apology, a public apology for that maybe stated misbehavior or misconduct, to a formal reprimand, which we know that the apology has already even come without the prompting of anyone. An invitation has come, so if a reprimand is in order, I'm sure that we would hear what what decision government will take. It also even includes resignation or suspension, and then ultimately when the conduct is of very severe nature, sometimes even bordering on criminality, you may be asked to go through termination.
Okay.
And so there are lessons for all of us public office holders in how we balance the public expectation of good. And this was one of the reasons why on your similar platform, when the issue of the value of gifts receiving, and again, the feedback we are getting. So in our code of conduct, it is mostly about receiving gifts, okay? And where the conversation is about gift giving, it's around the issue of hampers. So this time we need to go back again and have a conversation about gifts giving from you, the public office holder, and what the parameters of, being generous and, you know, responding to, look, when we go to places, your cars are swarmed by people asking for all kinds of things. And so when I said somewhere else that in a day, the expenses, and you people have done these democracy watch activities over years. And I've said that beyond having deeper conversations about political party financing and campaign financing, we must have an open, transparent conversation about governance financing, because once somebody transcends into public office, there is a lot of expectation to solve not only the long-term problem, but the immediate needs of people. And that in this cannot be described as being insensitive, because to not respond to these demands would rather present you as being non-responsive to the needs of the people that you say that you serve. So let us learn the lessons as public officers and see if we can find a balance between what the public itself expects from us. I think largely in Sammy's case, it is the recipient. It's the recipient of that
talk about,
gift that has created this brouhaha.
We'll talk about the fight against corruption, asset declaration, code of conduct, like you mentioned, and the 24-hour economy and the issues of unemployment. But Doc, brief take on this matter before we get into the topic of corruption.
So I've always said that our public officials always have to pass two tests, what I call the legal test and the appearance test. They tend to do well on the legal test, right? Anytime an issue erupts, you're first pointed to the law. Did he or she do anything wrong? Has he or she broken any law? What gets them into some of these unfortunate situations is the appearance test. And when you are in public office, you have to even pay more attention to the way things look, because that is where you even end up losing a lot more goodwill and trust. So my thing is, I mean, I'm glad that the Chief of Staff has summoned him. I'm glad that he apologized. There's a code of conduct in place. Whatever the appropriate sanctions are, I just hope that the president will demonstrate, you know, swiftness in dealing with this in terms of applying the appropriate sanction, so that at least he can show that, look, this code of conduct that we have instituted, it's a policy that we intend to reinforce. And it's a lesson to all current public officials as well, right? That nobody is against you being generous. But you also have to put it within the right context and know that it can have certain unintended consequences.
You speak of appropriate sanctions. What would be appropriate from where you sit?
Appropriate, at most, suspension.
At most?
Yes.
Suspension?
Yes, at most.
At most?
Yes. At
worst case scenario?
Worst case scenario, yes.
So those who are saying he should be sacked and the rest, what do you say to them?
No, and in fact, to quickly also revisit the code of conduct, I think one of the things the code of conduct needs to do now is the last section on measures of violation. I think it needs a lot more clarity and specificity around things like first offense, appropriate sanction, even depending on the type of offense. So for example, if you improperly file a government document, right, do you get the same sanction versus if you engage in an act of corruption or a conflict of interest? Do you see what I'm saying? You need a lot more clarity so that, you know, it's like one strike, this is the appropriate penalty, two strikes, this is the appropriate penalty, in this area, this is the appropriate penalty. But I wouldn't go that extreme of...
But I think even with the code of conduct, there's, you know, there are certain steps, a reprimand, and then certain things follow to the point where there could be a resignation and a termination. Just because you mentioned the code of conduct.
Right.
If you asked me, I mean, I was disappointed. Over the weekend, a lot of people, you know, passed comments on that, and I feel quite a bit of them justified. Yes, he did the right thing by apologizing. Yes, it's another right step for the Chief of Staff, Julius Deborah, to invite him, give him the summons. But I feel that was poor judgment. It's not to say that we understand the cultural, you know, aspect of it and how some things happen. But I keep saying it was clear, there were phones, cameras. Like, I mean, it was obvious that this was being, maybe it should have been taken care of in that light. But anyway, those are my quick thoughts. Shamima, so you've you've given some confirmation on the invitation, and that you don't know what it will entail, though.
No.
You don't know.
Yeah.
That. Okay. How seriously is government taking this?
Every action, however minor or major, is taken seriously by government, as we should, because, again, one of the greatest tests of this administration would be its congruence to its stated values. And it is fair that if we set a high standard for ourselves, that Ghanaians would want to hold us to those standards, especially when we had seen really eroded standards in governance over the years. And so when you hear people recognize the progress we are making in our attempts to sanitize our governance, we know that to whom much is given, much is expected, even if we have brought it upon ourselves. Because again, we can't lament about deteriorating governance standards and do nothing about it. So, for example, Dr. Akwete was on Joy this weekend, and he did acknowledge the fact that since the Fourth Republic, we have never seen any sanction at all made against any public officer for breaching, say, the asset declaration regime. And that even though none of the appointees have actually breached the enabling law, which gives them at least 6 months, up to 6 months, to file their asset declaration forms. His Excellency, because of the agency with which he needed all appointees to be aligned to his values of prudence and respect for our rules, is the one that gave us the deadline of 31st of March. And because people breached it, on the day that he actually launched the code of conduct was the day, as you have said, that we need to give examples that we mean business. This second action regarding Sammy Gyamfi is not the first. The first major test was on the day of the launch, when the president announced sanctions to appointees who missed the 31st deadline, even though they had not missed the constitutional expectation of a 6-month, period.
Right. And
what was the sanction? It is quite severe. 3 months forfeiture of salary is quite severe as a first indication of seriousness to the ideals of these new resets agenda that His Excellency, has communicated to the people of Ghana. And so there is that goodwill on the side of His Excellency. What I also want to say is that we should encourage more transparency and more honesty on the side of, public office holders. I have found in my attempt to be sometimes open and honest about these matters that are vexed matters, for long periods of time, and to also communicate that even as we put these programs and plans in place, there will be room for improvement, because we can't have a perfect, guideline. Just as we even do not have a perfect constitution. 32 years on, a constitution review committee is hard at work to look at the errors. So once there is that communication of goodwill, let us all come together. And that's why His Excellency said, let us join hands. Right. Because the task of resetting this nation is not only a work that can be done by political leaders. It must
be done by all of us.
I
just have a quick follow-up. We must move the conversation forward. The president gave a deadline, which was last Wednesday, for the declaration of assets, lest you could lose your job.
Yes.
What's the latest on that? Does it mean all of the government's appointees per the law have filed their asset declaration?
They should have. They should have.
But you don't know for certain?
I don't know for certain, because we need to find out from the office of the Chief of Staff per the reports that he'll be getting from the Auditor General, who has since complied with the extended deadline, and also to indicate that that deadline is for all those who had been appointed up to the 31st of March. Because new appointments are being made.
So short deadline, long deadline.
Even as we build. The point of the matter is, for the new appointees, they know not to dilly-dally with the filing of their asset declaration, but there will be a reasonable expectation. And
so if we find out that some people have not declared as of today, what happens?
They should face what the president said they would sack, is what they would face if indeed by the extended deadline they did not file, which was last Wednesday.
Well, 124 days over. Let's talk about what's next. And I want to start from the fight against corruption. According to the president of the Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition, Beauty Nate, Ghana loses $3 billion each year due to corruption. And the 2024 Corruption Perception Index, we scored 42. The question on my mind is, Shamima, this is to you before I come to Doc. What concrete steps is this Mahama administration taking to fight corruption head on? You tell us.
One is the step of self-regulation and good example. Because one of the things all of us continue to hear on a daily basis from His Excellency, which even transcended the period of his ascension to the high office, was that he's going to demand the highest level of standards and ethical conduct from first his appointees. And why we believed him then was because even in his first era, where there were some challenges, even in that era, members of his administration that were called into question for some, corrupt activities were prosecuted and some were jailed. And so we believed him when he says that it's not going to be business as usual. Mm-hmm. And I think from the first two key, actions that have been taken, the foundation is set that we must watch what we do, watch our back, and most importantly, we must be vigilant, but also honest in our private dealings, because you will never know when your private dealing would become a public spectacle. Mm. One of the pillars of our manifesto was accountability. At the core of this manifesto is accountability. Also because the deteriorations we had seen in all of these accountability institutions, CDD, that Dr. Kwapong works through its Afrobarometer report, persistently had put out information and data about these deteriorations in our, public institutions, including the judiciary, including politicians. I mean, their latest one, we are seeing a bit of, some movement. And I think these actions that we are taking will further consolidate those gains if we are able to go ahead on it. So if you take the corruption, you're asking what can we do to deal with corruption? One is to show a very just and fair approach in our accountability methodology in terms of holding previous public office holders to account. And so if you see I've made a point. I actually started with ourselves. So I started that example of accountability with ourselves. So please, you accept that, concede that I started with ourselves. So this is the second one. So we can only do that much because there's an expectation from the public to hold members of the previous administration. It was one of the election oral was a mantra that in the villages, when we went there, they told us, because in their faces, in their eyes, even without the benefit of any expertise, people can feel what profligacy is. People can feel what corruption looks like on the side of public office holders whose lifestyles people knew before office and people are now assessing whilst in office. People can see how the system colludes and connives to allow those, found in public breach of some of our anti-corruption, issues are allowed to go. People can see and feel if there was commitment on the side of leaders, if presidents are the ones rather clearing, reports of corruption or misconduct on the side of people felt those things.
Two quick follow-ups.
Yes.
You mentioned oral. It's been a while I heard anything concrete coming from oral, maybe some prosecutions here and there. In the first few months when you assumed office, it was all over the place in terms of the number of reports coming through and all that. Second one would be the institutions. You and I know that the Office of the Special Prosecutor is challenged. What intentional steps are you taking as, this new administration
to strengthen the Office of the Special Prosecutor? We will come and scrap the Office of the Special Prosecutor.
And replace it with oral.
It hasn't happened, isn't it? So the Office of the Special Prosecution is still there, and we will empower them to do their independent work. Remember that OSP is an independent institution, it's an independent constitutional entity, so it has its whole rights. What we shouldn't do is to appear as we have seen in the past and have OSPs come and sing lamentations about how they were being frustrated in their attempt to exercise their constitutional mandate. So far, you haven't heard any such complaints from the OSP. In fact, when the Attorney General, which who is the public officer who has engaged the media the most since we came into power, giving you, so I'm surprised to say that you haven't heard, because the Attorney General has spoken about oral in his first, media address, and gave us, where we are 4 months, we are in 4 months. The Attorney General came in 2 months ago, So if you look at the practicality of the work and the volume of work that he has done, just last week, the Minister of Government Communication announced that 65 cases from the oral report are currently matters that are active, that individuals have been invited for questioning, that briefs are being made and they are being prepared for court.
Right.
The Attorney General has also indicated in his various engagements with the public, the various cases, including the current live case of the National Signals Bureau former head, which is in court. And we know that for a fact. So there is work going on. And if you look at our reports on all the other cases that we said, the Sputnik V and all the scandals of the previous administrations, they are all in various stages of investigation. And within reasonable time, we should be presenting dockets to the court
interesting point to make so
prosecute some of those individuals.
Just quick thoughts. Are you impressed with the work of Oral so far? And she talks about timelines. For you, what are the timelines? Because some people are saying, look, it's about 1 or 2 people every 4 months, and that this is not the oral. Oral is not oralizing. What's your take?
So let me put my answer within the context of something former President Akufo-Addo always used to say about how you deal with corruption. Yes, it also hurt him in some way, but he would always say that not until you find yourself in trouble, you won't appreciate due process. The importance of due process. He spoke about that quite a lot. Quite a lot, right? So you would have to yes, oral is not oraling, right? But yes, I can see why politically you want to see justice being done overnight. But you also have to respect due process. Yeah. And due process will take time.
And the Attorney General has mentioned that there's quite a list of matters he's looking at.
He's given an update. I think he announced the first set of charges against a former official and I think his spouse. So it will take time for all of these cases to be dealt with. We do very well when we are fighting corruption on what I call post-regime accountability. So there's a turnover election, a new government comes, and they are able to look back to see what wrongs took place, alleged wrongs, and then holding such persons accountable. I think the challenge now, or the added dimension that is needed, is in regime accountability. How do you deal with your own people who are alleged to, should these matters come up, how do you deal with it?
Right.
The other part that I think we should also look a lot more at is the administrative infractions and alleged corruptions that is captured in the Auditor General's report. I mean, year after year, the infractions or the nature of the infractions are the same: procurement, financial, etc., etc. But the volume and the value of those infractions keep going. Anybody who has paid attention to the Auditor General's report over years would see that the volume of these things keep growing. And that would be one area, if you can really find a way to plug all of those, I don't know if it's loopholes or whatever occasions, all the things that the auditor captures. That, for me, would be another key area.
If you look at even today's daily graphic, the disallowed expenditure and the Auditor General recouping some 12.7 billion Ghana cedis. That's out of a total sum of 38.9 billion Ghana cedis. And we are talking of 2020 to 2023. I think one of the major problems is the fact that it is usually posthumous. We allow the thing to happen before we try to recoup. And it's one of the most dangerous things, because once the money is gone,
it's gone.
The tendency to have spent it or used it in some way is very high, and recouping it becomes a major problem. And if you look at it technically, some of the areas where we bleed the most, the very places that should be protecting, our expenditure. Look at that. Public boards, 10.79 billion. Yeah. Ministries, departments and agencies, 1.86 billion. Technical universities, internally generated funds, which are misappropriated. District assemblies, common fund.
Yep.
So it's quite an issue that we ought to look at. There's also the bit about, again, going back to the 120-day social contract. Shamima has espoused, she's waxed lyrical about, you know, the gains that have been made.
Framing.
Well, you've been very,
if there's a point you disagree with, you say it, because it is either what
all I'm saying is that
fact,
you've been
very lyrical connotes a certain
there's nothing
negative
or exaggeration.
It means you've been eloquent in espousing the gains of this administration. And I'm trying to find out from him.
That's why people, I know them. Forget I was sitting on this chair.
I want to find out from you, Doc, whether you feel, you are with the CDD, right? Looking at the different percentages that have been given, government gave itself, what, 72%, thereabouts? The
80
MPP?
Actually.
Okay.
80 done, 20 in progress from our assessment.
The NPP scored this administration 120 days, 48%. I've seen 90%, I've seen 80%, 72%, and all of those. What is your assessment based on the metrics?
The fair assessment is it has 25, I think it lists 25 things, right? So the fair basic assessment is to say the social contract indicated these 25 things. As of the 120th day, which ones can you check off as having been done and which ones remain undone? For me, the biggest thing is what kind of signals and what kind of indication is the president giving in terms of how he wants to govern the country? Because the most important question is not necessarily the ability to have checked these things off. Important as it is, the most important thing is what difference will these things make? And on that question, you need more than just 120 days to see how the ability to have put in place a code of conduct is going to turn out and all of that. So for me, it's a question of time, and that time is not 120 days. Is it important to have set the right tone with these things in the 120-day social contract? Yes. The president, as I keep saying, is signaling that this is my priorities, this is how I want to govern the country. But there's a lot more that will be done, a lot more policies, programs that would be implemented, and it is with time that we would get to be able to see whether, you know, the administration is moving the governance and socio-economic development needle forward in positive ways.
Maybe just a brief bit before Citi comes back in. In-house, we gave a score of 52% in terms of the rate of completion. And of course, if you add those that have not yet been completed, it would balloon to about 80%. But as of what has been completed, 52%.
Right. So
now, in respect of even the gains that have been made, some people say that the real detail, like Doc was slightly alluding to, is in ensuring that we get the boons, the benefits from them, and that for some of them, it's not just ticking a box, I have done this, but the end result, the stability moving forward. What's the plan for that?
So even with your framing of 52% complete, that is not even how we look at it. For us, we look at it, all of the things that we have marked as done. So you see from my note here, it's done and in progress. So we didn't use complete because a lot of those actions are not actions that can be completed. They are actions that are foundational actions to build upon the reset agenda. They are actions that communicate immediately to the people of Ghana our key priority areas of the economy, of job creation, and how we build and share prosperity for the people of Ghana. So if you look at the actions we have taken within the first 4 months, where we're able to hold the National Economic Dialogue, which inputted the budget process, and then the finance minister presented a very transformative budget that is beginning to restore confidence from both internal and external watchers. And today, we are happy at the positive, signals we are seeing with our fuel prices are down. I saved 300 cedis this morning, filling my tank. Previously, I would have paid an extra 300. These are like money in people's pocket directly. Because the vision was, because of the hardships, when we come to power, our first set of policies around the economy should be around ways we can ease the immediate hardships. So the nuisance taxes, 4 of them, 3 complete, with the exception of the COVID-19, which we have explained to the understanding of fair-minded Ghanaians that it is intricately linked with our IMF program and our overall tax rationalization measures. So even as we wait to do that, the government has passed 9 more financial bills, that is going to help create greater efficiencies within the economy, including the Public Financial Management Amendment Act. There's been a VAT Amendment Act, an Income Tax Amendment Act, the uncapping of all of these NHIA levies to ensure that we commit resources to these social programs so we can ease the immediate burden. If you also look at the job creation pedestal, is to communicate head on that we accept that there's an unemployment problem, which is a threat to the security of this nation. And so we must be doing something concrete to address those problems. So what do? He sets up a youth ministry dedicated to rationalizing and mobilizing the support and interventions for the youth so we can better track and monitor progress. And so we couldn't have launched these job and youth initiatives on nothing. The real work has been done to the point where the portals are now on. So we'll mark it as done. But it is not complete because it is now left with the young people applying for the National Apprenticeship Program that has a budgetary allocation of about 300 million Ghana cedis. It is now up to the Ejumawura beneficiaries to apply and then be taken through the various capacity building training and the 10,000 business finally giving money from the allocation. So there's a deep recognition that we cannot just tick boxes because eventually, just as we asked of the opposition, we must feel the economy in our pocket.
On that note, because you're talking about economy, money in our pockets and all that, I want to talk about the 24-hour economy policy. I thought that was the anchor on which you're building all these other policies and frameworks to boost the economy, the way you came to meet it. But I'm curious to know if any sector has been selected to pilot implementation, or what is the rollout plan for the 24-hour economy?
But you've reported about the passport office that has started, the DVLA office that has started, the national, the publishing.
Hold on a second. We keep saying that there are systems that need to be put in place in order for a proper rollout of the 24-hour economy in terms of security. I still drive through darkness from that La Road. I don't know what's happening. We kept hearing that they'll be fixing the street lights. If something as simple as street lights are not on, are not working, we cannot say that we are fully implementing 24-hour economy. So what I'm asking is, in terms of these sectors that you yourself have just mentioned, DVLA, and are those being implemented in isolation or is part of a broader plan? If so, what is the broader plan and how are you putting those systems in place so that we can actually see that we are operating a 24-hour economy?
So what the president did immediately he came to power was to set up the 24-hour economy office led by the Dr. Mr. Guzi Tano. And I can tell you, because I saw him so many times coming to brief the president. So sometimes from us internally, we can almost feel the urgent commitment on the side of, the president. But we recognize that urgent commitment alone cannot be enough. When we went 2 weeks ago, was it, to the retreat, Guzi Tano came and did a very comprehensive, presentation on where we're going to start from. It's a program. It's a vision to actualize the 24-hour economy in our system. It's not an event. It's not even a series of events. It will be started by pilots, by institutions that can almost immediately come on board. 2 weeks ago at the presidency, the president launched the Accelerated Export Development, task force, which is made up of key stakeholders, including the AGI, including GRA, to sit around the table and figure out how we can support. Through that initiative, we already have 10 major businesses who have already shown, private businesses, mind you. The option, the vision eventually is to activate our private sector to be the real, cauldron around the 24-hour economy.
Are you incentivizing these
of course,
private?
the president announced during his speech that a committee is being put in place that is looking at the incentive package for these businesses. Whilst we are doing that to roll out a program We must do the necessary consultations, and the grants work that you're talking about would have to be rolled up. So I just need Ghanaians to understand that it is not an event. It's a series of actions that will ultimately lead, and we're already piloting with government agencies that we have direct control over, that we don't necessarily need to give extra incentives because they are already incentivized to the extent that it is the public purse that is, supporting some of these, entities, even though some are also private, but they are public, institutions.
Right.
So we will get there. I understand that people need, they want to feel the energy.
Passport,
they need to
it's
feel
an
the
isolation.
energy.
I think some months ago we heard about the petroleum sector also saying that they're also going to start, but it looks like these are just happening in.
That's how
big
big programs start.
Well, Doc?
Big programs start.
So let's hear from
right. So I think
Professor.
what is needed is that comprehensive, encompassing framework that ties it all together. So in the president's update, for example, he highlighted certain government agencies that are already trying to provide 24-hour services.
Yeah.
He also talked about a committee that is looking at, I think it's the Investment Act and some of the labor laws. And so, where the necessary tweaks are made to be able to accommodate whatever or however the 24-hour economy would look like. But as I've said, sooner rather than later, you just hope that it would all come together in that one comprehensive framework so that you would get a sense of where are the priority areas, what kinds of incentives are being offered to which sectors, how is it being rolled out, where will the government begin, the implementation, all of that. I think once Ghanaians start seeing the actuals like that, that is what would give them that confidence that the 24-hour economy has moved beyond a central campaign message into the implementation phase. Because it was really key to the 2024 campaign that the NDC launched around the economy. And so I think that urgency, as Shamima is saying, is there. We just want to make sure that we are seeing that full rollout. Even if it's going to be rolled out in stages, you still want to see.
So you're confident that they're on track in terms of the implementation of this 24-hour?
Well, from everything that the president gave an update on in his speech, I believe that they are. But, being on track, is one thing, right? People want to see that, yes, you are heading in the right direction, but, you just want to see a lot more specifics and a lot more details.
Those specific for me is just street lights. We cannot talk about 24-hour economy policy or, a way of governance or economy, whatever it is, without street lights. Shamima, how seriously is this administration taking something as simple as lighting our streets?
In fact,
just here,
very seriously, the Greater Accra Regional Minister herself, when she came to office, gave herself at least 50 days to try and fix some of the broken.
Then we saw some
broken
PR,
down,
we saw some videos.
And then you did see some of those broken down ones. I think that it is true that Accra is largely dark. We can't run away from that fact, and that's the truth of the matter. And again, it's a matter that the Ministry of Energy and Green Transition is working seriously at, because if you look at our power sector, it has the highest debt next to cocoa board. There are great inefficiencies, especially in our power sector. We are sitting on debilitating debts occasioned as a result of grand collusion and corruption. We are still reeling from investigations into the missing ECG, containers. Where are they? And we saw poles that are supposed to light up. You showed us images of those poles abandoned in uncompleted buildings and in bushes. How did ECG poles and cables, which is supposed to increase connectivity, how did they find themselves in abandoned communities? So there are bigger problems that 4 months cannot, they don't let themselves to quick fixes. We must first acknowledge it. We must look at where the leakages and the abuses have come from. And we as a new government must show commitment to depart from that era and begin to show evidence of what we are doing differently. to be able to address those matters.
So
I won't sit and say
you're
that
saying that there's a commitment from this administration to light our streets. I think it would help if you gave us some timelines.
Right.
Just like you set your own questions with the 120 days. What timelines are we working with in terms of when we can say that Accra is finally being lit? We have lights and we can drive safely.
On this question,
yes.
It will not lie in my mouth to give the timeline. So from here, I'm going to call the
I'll call you back, Shamima, because I want that answer.
Sweetie says, when are you going to light up Accra? And then when he gives me the answer, I'll come and give
a top-up will be,
answer.
and sometimes there is some need for timelines. You may not be the Greater Accra Regional Minister. Yes. You may not be the Mayor of Accra. Yes. But just as a promise was made about Accra being the cleanest city in Africa, and being where we are, there's a sanitation problem.
Yes.
So when we try to hold you to timelines on these things, there's good reason. And
it's because we agree with you totally. That's why we even held ourselves to a 120-day timeline to put pressure on ourselves.
But beyond that, let's be more proactive and stick to our timelines. Beyond the street lights, another major problem, which actually leads to a lot of accidents that I see, faulty traffic lights. I've seen reports on the traffic light situation and how many of our traffic lights, even in Accra, are working. You know, there are certain places where you get to all the time and it's free for all. Yes. You know, it's chaos.
It's chaotic.
The state of nature, if you like.
Here.
You have to, every time, and I don't know for how many years I get to the Labadi Beach, you know, hotel stretch. And, Senior, sometimes it's crazy. I mean, there have been so many near accidents that I have seen. Because everybody is trying to go and no one wants to give way for the other person. So as we look at street lights, let's look at traffic signals as well. Those are crucial. On the bit about, you know, the gains we have made, though, I have heard some talk, I don't know whether it was the finance minister, talking about the fact that on the back of our city's gains, of course, our debt stock naturally is reducing. What's the state of that? Where are we?
Well, because you see, when the finance minister presented the budget, a lot of our debt commitments were pegged to an exchange rate of $1 to 16 cedis, for example. So if today...
The 721 billion or so that
we have to 600 pay. We have to pay about 480 million cedis almost every year in debt commitment. And if just by the CD appreciation, we are making some gains there. So we don't have to pay at an exchange rate of 16 cedis, but now 13 cedis. I think the challenge is how to ensure that whatever the stars are, they remain aligned in our favor this way. There may be some external, positive, some external negative actions that are positive to us, but internally, of the things that we have direct control over, I think that the Finance Ministry is working very collaboratively with the Bank of Ghana, and the indications, even from our partners, are that they are happy with the trajectory that we are going. From the IMF spring meetings, there seems to be a certain renewed confidence in the Ghanaian economy. I mean, Standard & Poor has given us a review of our credit rating, and that is positive. That is to CCT+. That is really positive. So we need to do more of the good things that we are doing. Of course, there are people who are saying that, okay, you haven't started paying a lot. We can't pay without the audits. Because again, the finance minister has given indication about shady contracts that we're giving without commencement certificates, and people have come to present certificates for payment. So it is not in the interest of the government to honor those kinds of certificates without the necessary audits being done to investigate those matters. So we expect that we'll make savings from obligations that are not justified to be paid with the taxpayers' money, and renegotiate some of those payments that we find some legitimacy to, but maybe some excessive, valuation of those projects. So we're looking at all of that. But it's also the communication of prudence in the management of public resources. Look, I have attended several committee meetings, and it's as small as it is big ultimately in how the leakages happen around our ministries, department, agencies. several committee meetings, there's no lunch. They're not going to give you lunch that I personally have attended. And you will hear the complaints, I'm free meeting, lunch, at least tea and some biscuits will provide. But, you know, ordering lunch, and we haven't been doing that. So even at the presidency, we got, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but I think I would say it. We got a memo telling us that apart from some specific offices, they are disabling all DSTV subscriptions. So apparently, many offices with little doing had DSTV subscriptions. So you can imagine the cost of that. I'm saying that the commitment to really change is tangible.
Okay, Shamima, just hold there for
so
me.
Let me just say that they assured us that, oh, we'll make sure that you can have access to free-to-air channels. So every
so those
one
DSTV
of us,
bits, who was paying for that? Taxpayers' money?
I don't know, but I should think so. It would have been part of cost under Office of Government Machinery. It would have been all these.
That's actually a very interesting, if you went into it, especially with the escalating prices
of DSTV.
I'm just not sure how I feel
these
about
channels. But Doc, just a quick bit on, and of course, this is partly your area, so I want us to look at it. The bit on the economy and the exchange rate and how some things are going. I've got some interesting comments. Professor Isaac Wedi, who usually comes here for our news review, Dean of Accounting and Finance at the UPSA, he says, Ghana can't outsource city stability to global luck. That's what he says. Then you have Dr. Nyame also saying city stability has been built on short-term tricks, not real growth. But you would have your own friend, Dr. Theo Champong, explain to all of us why the Ghana cedis recovery isn't just external luck. And he will talk about the things that are happening. You would have Professor Lord Mensah also say that these are very positive signals and that certain proper actions are being taken. 4 people, 2 on one end, 2 on the other end. What do you see? What do you see?
So first, let me put a disclaimer that I'm not an economist.
Oh, of course, I know you are not an economist, but you dabble in.
But the economy does you, and you must have an opinion of the economy.
It's a combination of what both are saying, right? I mean, I would go to what the governor of the central bank said, right? Dr. Siama. He pointed to, improvements in our reserves, the inflows, of the dollar. He pointed to better alignment between our monetary and fiscal policy. But then he also pointed to an external factor like the weakening of the US dollar. So it is a combination of both some of these external and internal. I think Dr. Theo Champong gave the most comprehensive explanation of all the things that is contributing to the stability now. The thing that for me will be also important is how you manage and keep that stability. Because we've also seen periods. I mean, if you look at our historical trajectory of the exchange rate, you tend to see periods of highs, periods of lows. Yes. And I think it's that highs and lows that makes it very difficult for businesses to plan, for government to plan, its fiscal outlook and things like that. So managing it at a relatively stable level, I think, will be very important going on. I also hope that we tend to, I hope that the NDC would also have at the back of its mind the political consequences of doing politics with the exchange rate, right? We saw what happened.
Dr. Baumia said it, right?
Exactly, right? And how that became one of the
could expose
one of the things that was, sort of quote unquote held against him. So yes, if it was going bad, I'm sure blame would have been laid at the feet of the current government. So if things are improving, it is only fair that they get the credit for it. But a combination of all of those things, but also keeping at the back of your mind that, look, even as you jubilate over this improvement,
We're
and the
actually not
stability,
jubilating.
managing it and making sure that you can keep it relatively stable based on the things that the governor of the Bank of Ghana said will be very important.
Shamima says they are not jubilating, but
I mean,
you are happy about it and you are touting it now.
It gives us
So
a certain
we all want it to remain this way
Correct.
and get even better. But if it goes the other way, you would have to rejoice and accept it the same way you're accepting
We
this
will
one.
not rejoice, but we will have to accept
You will
it.
have to accept it.
But also to just say, Sweetie, that I think that we also, Sammy Gyamfi has done a great job with the Gold Board. It was one of the legislations that within a very short period between the drafting, it had the most comprehensive stakeholder engagements that we have ever seen in the process. And I can say so because I used to be a parliamentary advocacy officer years ago with the Legal Resources Center. And that was really my work, monitoring the process of legislation making. So that the key stakeholders became the key proponents of the legislation, which is really now law. And as we can see with the figures we are getting, that is really also shoring up, you know, the CD. But that's not the only reason why the CD is faring well. But the fact that we are nationalizing our natural resources and ensuring we get premium value from our natural resources, especially on the back of Galamsey and the devastation that this is leaving us. So we must control who mines and how the gold leave our resources.
Great point,
and I think
actually.
the Gold
and I
Board
like
is
that
doing
you said
great.
You're commending Sammy Gyamfi for legislation, how it was fast-tracked and all that. So is there a challenge in terms of repealing LI 2462?
There's no challenge.
So why haven't we seen that yet?
There's no challenge because our understanding of what led to the proliferation of mining in forest reserves was with the empowering of the executive to grant those mining leases.
Your understanding of it. Shamima?
Yes.
In the lead up to election 2024, you and I sat here
and
I
spoke
heard
about
you
it.
Hit at the Eswal administration so hard.
Yes.
And we were all united in the call to repeal that LI and declare a state of emergency.
Can I
you just said that you're commending Sammy Gyamfi for fast-tracking a legal instrument.
Yes.
It's the same legal instrument that you need. In this case, you just need to repeal it. And you are amending
it. But then you don't understand the nuance of the issue with the legal...
from your understanding, you just needed to take that executive power from the president,
which
right?
It was one of the low-hanging fruits.
Yeah, but that was not what we're asking
for. So do you want me to explain? Because I've explained this matter. No one in their right state of mind would want to encourage or play with the threat of Galamsey on our life. And now I sit here as a mother who has had all my children, and my children living and growing in this country to make any... Because I'm not engaged in Galamsey. I have not taken any Galamsey person's money. So I am not interested in defending illegal mining or the desecration of our forests, and especially our water reserves, because water is life. I said that we were aligned to the advocacy, and I was here strongly calling for a state of emergency and the repeal of the LI 2462. Mind you, because of the public conversation and because the NDC continues to listen, that's call for the repeal of LI 246, even though we have repealed the section that gives the president power to grant mining leases, which is really what led to the proliferation of companies operating in forest reserves. As we speak to you, we have arrested 9 individuals who were reported to have been national security operatives who were supposed to have taken over illegal mining team.
We have to go. That's what they're doing. We know the things you're doing right now on the fight against Galamsey.
Because there was evidence.
That it looks like there's been a U-turn on. That's what
There's no U-turn, and that is not fair, because if you're looking at the rollout of the collaborative effort between security agencies as well as the forces and the clamp down on communities and the daily arrest of illegal miners, you cannot say there's a U-turn.
We are grateful.
Because it is the effect of the actions and the commitments of leaders, and we have proven. But we're still hearing and taking feedback.
Maybe some 20
And I'm sure that the president will act if removing the LI, but again, also to amend the minerals and mining, because that's really the enabling act that has really empowered the LI.
I'm sorry I have to.
Sorry.
Quick thoughts,
I mean, as you said, beyond the 120 days. So I think that what Ghanaians will now keep looking out for, the government's policies, programs, and how it improves governance and our socioeconomic outcomes.
All right. And so our guest who joined us for this conversation, Shamima Muslim, Deputy Government Spokesperson, and we also had John Osai Kwapong. He's a CDD fellow. Still.